about maximizing your potential. So it's about trends, getting noticed, getting hired. So some of the content's a little bit more geared towards people that are newer in their IT or development careers, but there's something here for everybody. The big thing is, I definitely want people to feel like this is not just me talking at you. So when we're on a slide, if you experience something or you have a thought or want to dialogue about something, throw your hand up, we'll call on you. It's not just kind of a one-way thing. So I'll jump right in. So about me, my name is Dave Patterson. I am a lead IT recruiter at Eliassen Group. So I've been in the industry for a little over 6 years. So last week was my 6-year anniversary, which is very exciting. They give you the lead title if you just survive in staffing for 6 years. So it's a high turnover and pretty tough. So I was the Recruiter of the Year in 2017 at Eliassen Group, and that's out of about 125 recruiters company-wide, which really just means that I peaked, and now I'm on a slow decline into obscurity. I've placed about 200 IT professionals, so I've placed a lot of folks that specialize in Java, so Java engineers and testers and SDETs and such, but a wide variety, so BAs, QAs, PMs, everybody kind of involved in SDLC I've worked with, but they do specialize in the software space. And so Eliassen Group works with everybody from Fortune 100 companies all the way down to early stage startups. So I have experience working with lots of different hiring managers, lots of different perspectives, and so a lot of the content and information is going to be informed by that. All right. So what we're going to be covering today during the talk. So we're going to be covering some of the latest hiring trends in IT. So everyone's sort of familiar with standard interview processes like phone interviews and face-to-face interviews. That's not really kind of new territory, so I'm going to try to touch on some of the newer things that I've been seeing. Not from every client, it's not ubiquitous, but if you are considering going into the job market or you're just sort of curious on what's going on, changes that are happening, it's just a good sort of touch point to think of kind of strategies or sort of ways you might approach different some of the newer IT or interview methodologies or things that our clients are doing. I'm also going to be covering some strategies for getting the job that you want. So some strategies you can employ once you've identified a specific job or a specific client, a specific team that you're trying to get into. That's a really common thing that happens, whether it's AI or whatever interests you. And then finally, just some kind of surface level resume considerations and strategies. And I've kind of geared it more towards entry, mid, to senior, and then also management level resumes. Some of these things are common knowledge. Some things you just don't think about it because you're not writing your resume every day. If you've been in a company for 5 years, you probably haven't touched your resume in that long, although it is best practice to update as you go along. And so as you get back into it, it's just a good refresher to sort of hit the high notes, what's really critical here, what's not critical here. So some of the newer hiring trends in IT, I'm going to jump in. What we've seen from the staffing side, so I'm in staffing and IT consulting. That's what Eliassen does. We've seen fierce competition for a dwindling, or not dwindling, it's sort of the same supply of engineers, but the demand has really spiked. So I'll just kind of throw it out there. Who, and just a show of hands, who has gotten hit up for a job, and this is by any method, phone, email, LinkedIn, in the last year? Anybody in here? So pretty much everybody, right? Okay. So what about the last 6 months? Everybody? Okay, what about the last 2 months? Okay, cool. What about the last 2 weeks? Today. Right? So this is sort of, and I'm a recruiter, so I'm getting hit up, and obviously we're sort of like a follow-on field, but you guys can look around the room and see, everybody got hit up today for a job. And so when you think of that and sort of what that means for you as a job seeker, it basically means that we have this fierce competition from employers, right? So IT employment is historically low. Article in Wall Street Journal fairly recently, it's a 20-year low, hovering around 1%. I feel like in 6 years of my industry experience, it has never been harder to find qualified candidates who are interested to make a move. It's the number of open requirements has really, if anything, gone up. The number of people available and actively looking has gone down. And so this has generally resulted in increased wages, although it's not across the board. Certain skill sets have stayed somewhat stagnant, but I've seen kind of the average rates go up over time. And this is across multiple markets, not just Charlotte. I do work primarily in Charlotte, but we've seen it more or less nationwide. Increased perks, so things like a sweet open bar. Thank you, LendingTree, by the way. But that's not the only thing, right? That could be remote work. That could be a basketball court on site like Red Ventures has. All kinds of interesting perks, and employers are trying to get creative about ways to stand out from the crowd outside of money, because money is important, but generally speaking, it's not everything. And if you can appeal to that edge case candidate who really gets fired up about a really awesome 401k match or another type of benefit, you can win in some cases where you might have lost otherwise. And then finally, the other thing that's driving some of these innovative or changed processes in interviewing, a lot of employers, especially ones that are struggling with hiring, are trying to streamline the interview process. So everyone's trying to figure out how to reduce the human element as much as possible in terms of the labor requirement to go out and find candidates and match them up to jobs. Everyone's trying to figure out how to get candidates screened out more effectively earlier to avoid wasting your dev team's time screening people that aren't going to get the job or are going to miss on some critical component. And so when you think through the lens of that, it's going to help inform why we're seeing some of the changes that we're seeing in the industry. So we've seen now an increase in AI. I've seen some clients getting into AI screening. Has anybody had an AI screen after a job application? Anyone? No? Okay. It's pretty new. We don't see it on the staffing side because we're kind of doing that pre-screening ourselves. So this is more coming up with direct employers. So they're moderately better than bots on Tinder, not substantially better. They're typically triggered after the HR black hole resume submission. Has anybody here gone to a website and uploaded your resume, and then been forced to replicate your resume after uploading it? So this is like the next step after that. But you're still not talking to a person because reasons. So it's worth dealing with it for an employer choice. So if you're trying to get into a great employer like LendingTree or Red Ventures or Bank of America and you really want to work there, it can be worth it, but it's kind of a rough experience, right? If you've ever interacted with customer support bots, they can be not super great. And that's the same thing with a lot of the screening bots. Coding challenges. So these have been around for a long time. I've seen more of our clients going back to them just because I think the reason I've seen it come around more lately has been because the volume of qualified candidates has gone down, so people are trying to kind of gussy up their resumes, make it look like they've done more than they really have, they get into the technical screening piece, and they kind of fall flat. So a lot of employers are trying to figure out that winnowing down and try to share that investment from the candidate side. They can be really time consuming depending on what they are. So I've seen things all the way from building a fully interactive website with a back end and a front end, all the way down to more simple coding challenges where you're just putting together some pseudocode and it might take 30 minutes. And so if you come across a coding challenge in the interview process, it's super important to consider whether the juice is worth the squeeze. So, if you've been in the industry for a long time and writing Java for a long time, you probably have a good idea of what it actually takes to build something from a requirement, at least a ballpark idea of what it would take and how many hours it would take. And so it's really important to consider that. Is it worth it? Is this thing going to change my career? Am I going to spend my whole weekend writing this thing and maybe not get a call back, right? Some clients I've come across will pay for your time. So that's actually kind of a cool thing. Because when you think conceptually about what a coding challenge is, it's really just uncompensated work. It's like if you were interviewing a carpenter to come do wainscoting on your wall, right? You're like, well, I need you to build me a chair just to verify that you can do the wainscoting, but I'm not going to pay you for the chair, but I'm going to keep the chair, right? So conceptually, there's sort of an uneven or an unbalanced aspect to coding challenges. That's one way it can be balanced out, but ultimately, it's something that's worth kind of further consideration as it comes up. Group and video submission interviews. So these have actually become, I've seen this happening with some of our direct clients, so, and also I'm sure it's happening elsewhere in out in the space. Has anybody here participated in a group interview that wasn't like Cutco, vector marketing, anything like that? No? Okay, so you have? Yeah, all right, no? Yeah, okay. So group interviews, they tend to reward the loudest and most outgoing, so you put people in a room and you're asking questions. It can be really tough to stand out in the crowd. So a lot of developers, as you guys may know, tend to be a little bit more introverted, maybe not as engaging or ready to go out and really be super vocal and loud in the group. So it can be kind of checking for things that aren't as relevant to being a strong developer or a strong engineer. They typically also kind of have this, I think it's an intended consequence, but it could also be an unintended consequence. they create like a competition vibe to the interview. So like, you know, if you were thinking of buying something and there's one on the shelf and 3 people are looking at it, right? Everybody kind of wants to lurch for it, even if they're not even sure they want it, just because they, you know, everybody wants the same thing. That same psychological aspect can come into play when you're going into group interview settings. It's something to be aware of. It's really important to maybe take a step back during group interviews and think, all right, well, okay, yeah, we're all competing for this, but do I actually want it, right? Like, am I getting the information? Am I getting what I need? And we've seen them more on the functional side, which is sort of logical. So like Scrum Masters and product owners, jobs where their primary function is really communication and being a conduit between developers and teams. But you could definitely see it happen within software engineering interviews as well. They're really difficult to prepare for. So like one of the biggest problems is the interviewers are individuals the same way the interviewees are individuals, and it's really, really difficult to know what they're looking for, right? So someone that's loud and vocal may think they're doing the best, but somebody that has a more poignant answer may really get the best play. You can't really know going into it what their preference is going to be. So that sort of informs, it makes it difficult to sort of get in the right headspace. So video submission interviews. Has anybody done a video submission interview as a first step in an interview process here? There you go. So we've had a couple, right? So these are actually, there's some advantages on the candidate side here. So they can be completed any time, so you don't have to step away from your desk and like really alert your boss, like what's up. Like I gotta, you gotta go to the conference room for whatever, and kind of risk somebody barging in and seeing that you're doing a Skype interview or recording a video interview. It can be done in your own time when you're kind of calm, cool, relaxed, collected. They allow for some personality screening for the managers up front. So it's a way for you to show yourself without that kind of competition vibe and pressure of a group interview. It allows you to, like really kind of let yourself shine in a comfortable setting where you're not kind of under a lot of pressure in an interview setting. The other thing that's really nice is you can do it in more than one take. So if you're super jazzed about a role, it's the job of your dreams and the first step of the video submission interview, being able to record 5 or 6 takes, it really gives you the advantage of avoiding major issues or avoiding technical glitches that can happen with live video interviews. We'll keep forging ahead.
Is there any kind of dressing up you can do if you have the skills for video editing and putting themes and stuff over the top of your videos, the same way you do a resume maybe?
Yeah, I think that would be that could be kind of a double-edged sword. So I think if you throw a bunch of like a filter on there to make yourself look super like Instagram filter, I don't know, that could be great. I guess it depends on the hiring manager and the viewer. So I think the biggest confounding variable there is like the unknown of how it's going to be viewed. I think it'd be cool to do like a green screen, like you're on the moon giving the video interview, or like at the beach, or at like a convention of some sort. Who knows? But that's definitely something to consider. And then the other part is like, how do you dress for a video interview at your house? Like, do you suit up and put on a tie, literally just take it back off and go sit down and have dinner? Like, there's some like kind of conceptual pieces, like head scratchers. Like, is it comfortable? Do you dress comfortably or do you dress up? There's a bunch of judgment calls there, and so probably best practice is going to be to, if you're interviewing for a startup where they're cheeky and fun and the whole thing is kind of avant-garde, then you should probably take more license and get a little bit more creative about what do I think this manager is going to want, what's going to match up to company culture, versus if it's a super buttoned-up Fortune 500 company, probably not super wise to do the whole like Cancun background. But yeah, so GitHub and coding sample reviews are like a big part of, especially when people are newer in their careers, trying to assess like who has what skills and who's a sort of promising, more junior developer. So this is a really great tool if you're trying to break into the industry to help you get hired. So having a GitHub with repos where you're contributing to repos or you have your own projects that are up, it's a great way to showcase what you've done beyond just words on a page, because every junior developer is going to say that they have, they work with Java and Spring and Hibernate and whatever. They're going to have the list of technologies, but what they've actually done with it is sort of a different thing, right? Like a lot of people will have in their resumes, oh, I was in an environment where I did this, or I was involved in this, which you see in a lot of resumes where people are really trying to pack in as much technology as they can. But when your code is available to view publicly, it's sort of it's something that avoids that sort of broad assumption or broad exposure. It's more specific about what you've actually done. It can be really challenging to write something meaningful and avoid those. So if you're working for a company and you're producing code every day, the chances of you being able to upload that code to a public repo and not get fired or sued, pretty low. Do you guys know, if you guys are, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say I've always been advised to have a portfolio, and I've always had that challenge of how do I take IP and working for them on there. The friends I've seen that have done it successfully with GitHub have some sort of hobby, and they just hobbyist program some pet project of theirs.
Yeah.
And they use that as the showcase, which can be sometimes not compatible with what you're hiring for. You know, if you want to build a drone cam or something, that might not make sense for a banking application or something.
Oh, for sure.
But you can usually talk through the stuff that you worked on. Seeing something that you're a hobbyist on, I would think would be a big highlight for saying this guy is just collecting a paycheck for what he does.
Oh, for sure. And the other piece is some code that you're writing really may not be all that proprietary or all that critical. So the other option is if you kind of judge it to be nothing that's going to get you in hot water with your manager or potentially harm the company that you're working for, best practice is to ask and get permission to throw it on GitHub. And I've had this happen with candidates before that shared either like reports they had built, and it's not always software engineers, but they're sharing their work product with me to try to showcase what they've done, and that's awesome because what's more powerful than that, right? Like it's the output of what we do. But I've had you kind of hit that tipping point where like, hey, if I share this with the client, they're going to be super concerned that you're going to do the same thing with what you provide for them. So it's really good to think a couple steps ahead that way. Either get the permission or, like you said, get involved in a personal project. If you can get involved in open source projects, that's also awesome. I'm not as familiar with how to get into that. Does anybody here contribute to open source, or is anybody involved in the open source community?
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. It depends on how the owner of that repository or project, how open they are for help. Usually within a community, you can find some low-hanging fruits that haven't gotten any attention.
Like tickets that are outstanding or something.
Yeah,
that's
there's got a
broken.
bunch of tickets. You see the developer hasn't touched it in a while, and you can usually get owner take over the project when you want to.
Oh yeah.
So that's been my experience, mostly around Drupal, but some other frameworks as well.
Absolutely. And really anything you're interested in. So that's the other cool thing about it is you can get involved, like you said, drones or something a lot of people are interested in. It could be football scores or predictions. It could be kind of anything. It could be whatever. So that's the other part that's kind of nice is you get fired up about it. It's a double-edged sword though. So the other piece here is when you were a junior developer and you were writing code 3 years ago and you threw it up in your GitHub repo, that may not really be representative of the work product that you're putting out now. So that's another consideration to have about sort of a negative. So if you wrote something a while ago and it's a jumbled mess that barely runs and breaks half the time, that may not be the best representation of what you're able to do. And so that's another consideration. The other piece is, depending on how it's reviewed, you can't really know what the preference is of the hiring manager that you're going to be sending this to or might be reviewing it either. So maybe the manager really wants you to have self-commenting code, or maybe they want every other line commented, or maybe they're big on three spaces or indents, right? Like you don't know what their preference is going to be. Those are sort of trivial things, right? But there's obviously deeper concerns here. But you can't really know what they want to see ahead of time. So those are some downsides of the older code pieces. So that's one other kind of side recommendation is try to keep it as recent as you can, as long as it reflects what you're doing. Another industry trend that we've seen has been contracting versus full-time, contracting and consulting. There's sort of pros and cons to both. So contracting gets a bad rap, sometimes justifiably so. It's become really commonplace in the largest employers. So smaller employers still tend to do direct hire. So if you talk about startups or mid-sized companies, they aren't really into the nitty-gritty of bringing in consultants to try to hold down costs. They're going to be doing a lot more direct hiring. They can be really unstable. So I'm sure there's companies here in town that have reputations for being unstable for contractors. There's companies that have reputations for being really stable for contractors. It's a mixed bag, and if you don't know up front sort of a reputation of a company, if it's a remote job, you can be walking into a situation where you're back on the market in 2 months because they didn't hit their Series B funding, right? So it's a good consideration to have, or sort of price in that stability into when you're considering one of those roles. One thing that's great about consulting or contracting too, the available pool of candidates tends to be a little bit smaller. People that are willing to consider contracts tend to be a fewer number than people that are willing to go for a full-time role. So there can be situations where if you're desperate to get into a specific technology like Drupal, or if you're desperate to get into Spring Boot or some of the newer frameworks within Java, right? And you just can't get there from here, a consulting role may give you that opportunity. So it's not all negative, there are reasons to do it. And also it's sometimes industry. Finally, this is again highly dependent, and it's important to sort of work your networks and get a feel for different organizations and teams. And a lot of organizations, you see consultants being kind of like kept out of meetings, treated like second-class citizens, where their ideas aren't really as valued, or they're sort of kept at arm's length. Other organizations don't treat their consultants that way, and so it's important if you're considering doing a contract to sort of investigate the best you can and try to find out what you're walking into, because you can get into a situation that you're not thrilled about. And finally, one thing that's really helpful, consulting roles tend to have a really fast interview process. So some of our clients here in town, it's a 30-minute phone interview to an offer, which if you're out of work is fantastic. If you are really carefully evaluating the opportunity, it can be sort of panic-inducing. Like, I don't know that I would take a job personally off of a 30-minute phone interview. I think I have a really hard time with that conceptually. So it's something to think about in terms of speed. It can be an advantage and a disadvantage. Permanent roles are seen right away as more stable. So go, please.
What about your experience with the 18-month rule of big banks?
So yeah, great question. So tenure policies, most clients that have a big contingency or a big body of contingent labor or consultants, they usually will have some kind of a tenure policy. They're just trying to avoid that co-employment violation, but that co-employment rules Microsoft got nailed on, God, it's like more than 10 years ago now. And is anybody familiar with what I'm talking about? Co-employment? Yeah, everybody knows. Super. So in terms of my experience with it, some of my clients have tenure policies, some don't. The ones that don't are kind of running some measure of risk to maintain tribal knowledge. And then the cool down periods are really the kicker. So if you have a 6-month cool down period, I don't know too many people, and maybe you guys are better off than I am, I can't take 6 months off the job. So the chances of me leaving for 6 months and then being available and interested to come back after 6 months are small. So the net effect of some of those tenure policies tend to be, not brain drain, but you lose that tribal knowledge on the cycle. Or you can lose that tribal knowledge of applications on the cycle. Is that what you were kind of asking? Or?
Yeah, I mean, my experience, I've been in the Charlotte market for a long time, and what I've seen is you'll get kind of a revolving door between Bank of America and Wells Fargo, because they both have this 18-month contract rule, which means
for sure.
you work 18 months and then you got to go for 6 in that case. And what you'll see is 18 months at Bank of America, 18 months at Wells, 18 months at Bank of America, 18 months at Wells, because they want to keep the flexibility of the contract, but they still have that 18-month got to go rule.
Yeah, and a lot of folks really like working in the financial services industry. So the other advantage there is, when you're bouncing back and forth between Bank of America, Wells, or even Ally or other banks here in Charlotte that hire significant amounts of contingent labor, is that you come in the door sort of with street cred, if you will. Like, you understand how financial systems work, you understand how development works at banking clients, and so it gives you a leg up, getting your feet up under you, and also give you a leg up in compensation, right? So you might look more attractive than a candidate that's only ever worked in startups, for instance. Okay, cool. So permanent roles, as I'm back onto it, there seems more stable. They tend to offer better benefits and perks. So like, I always use Red Hat's example, and now they've been acquired by Big Blue. So it's, I don't know if it's all going away or not. But if you guys, does anybody here know about Red Hat's perks? Anybody?
No.
They're like ridiculous. So like, they'll do your dry cleaning for you. They have on-site childcare. I assume they'll detail your car if you ask really nice. But it's like over the top crazy benefits, and that was part of how they're able to be an employer of choice and sort of attract candidates in and be really selective. So not every company is doing that, but we are seeing more kind of perks happening. And I think if you look around here, you can see this seems like a really cool space. So Lending Tree is maybe another example of a company that's offering a lot of really strong perks. North Carolina is, one thing to remember is that North Carolina is still a right to work state. So and that's not exactly the right phrasing. It's actually more of at-will employment. So basically, you can be fired at any time for any reason, as long as it's not violating federal discrimination laws. So you can't be fired for your race, your religion, your creed, and so on and so forth. But just because it's a permanent role does not guarantee that you're going to be there forever. And I think occasionally people are hitting the market, they sort of forget that piece. So there's risk in every career move, there's risk in every position, and it's just about quantifying it. Typically, direct hire roles have a longer interview process. So employers are really hesitant to pull the trigger on people permanently because it's very hard in a lot of employers to get a bad hire out. And so they want to really avoid that bad hire stigma. So if you think of some of the largest employers in Silicon Valley, you hear of like 7, 8, 9 rounds of interviews. A crazy number where it's almost like an endurance challenge more than it's really about whether you're the best developer. It's really whether you can survive and advance, right? Anybody here had any crazy long interview like cycles? Anybody want to share?
Yeah, I had 2 days of interviews when I joined IBM.
Oh yeah, like 2 full days, like 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And were they in there like asking you how many ping pong balls fit in 747 the whole time?
That's an interview. That's an interview. Both kind of
Tasks, interviews, the whole time.
tests.
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 So like written or at a screen?
Yeah.
Man, but are you at IBM now?
No.
No. I'm sorry to hear that. That was a huge investment of time. And that's sort of the downside of some of these longer interview processes in permanent roles is you can have this huge time investment and it may not yield results. So again, it goes back to that is the juice worth the squeeze kind of piece. So let's say you've identified a job that you want. You've identified an employer that you want to work at, or maybe it's a remote position. Who knows? Lots of people get really fired up about different things. It could be different technology, different perks. So the absolute best way to break into an employer of choice are personal connections. So I want you guys to all just sort of give yourselves a round of applause. You're here. Yeah, come on, let's go. You're making connections. You're doing the things. You're meeting people. Employer referrals are the 800-pound gorilla breaking into a potential employer. So employers love them. Basically, 82% of employers rated the employer referrals above all other sources for generating best ROI, because there's a few reasons for this. The human connection piece helps avoid feeling like you're just a number, because you know Tim who works at LendingTree, and Tim told you all about the team, and so you don't feel like you're being sold. You're just talking with your friend Tim that you met at the Meetup group, right? Hopefully nobody here's the name Tim. It's really cheap for employers to have referrals come in as well. So hiring, you can think of hiring as a cost, typically in terms of either salaries or referral bonuses or paying outside agencies like Eliassen Group. It can be very expensive. The referral bonus that employers offer is usually fractional compared to what they pay an outside firm, and the employee's thrilled because they get a nice fat bonus for bringing their friend into an environment they love, and the friend feels like they're walking into a good situation. Preferred candidates are also more likely to accept an offer, which is sort of logical if you think about it. So, you went to Tim, you said, hey, I want to work at LendingTree, it's so awesome, right? And then, Tim sticks his neck out for you, or it's a perception, right? Tim gets your resume across. You get through the whole process and you get the offer. Whether you want to admit it or not, you're going to feel a little bit indebted to Tim. Because Tim, if they offer and they offer the money you want and you turn it down, you're thinking, man, Tim's going to look like a jerk, right? Like Tim's going to lose some street cred with his manager. So that it won't make people take a job they absolutely wouldn't take, but it drives up that acceptance percentage a little bit. If they have 3 offers and they're all kind of the same, but one came from Tim, all right, Tim's a good guy, I'll just take Tim's offer. So the other piece is, and we covered this already, so you're an introvert, so we're here at the Meetup now. That's how you make these personal connections. It's an awesome place to meet people in the industry, and obviously the group here that's leading these is really committed to building this up and making this a place where everybody can get connected to other people and sort of figure out what they want to do and where they want to go. Hackathons are awesome as well. If you really enjoy coding, and you enjoy coding so much that you want to do it in your spare time, hackathons are also incredible places to meet people that are talented and working in companies you've probably never heard of, doing things you've never heard about. Pretty incredible. And there's lots of community outreach groups. So I was lucky enough to participate in Skookums Night Shift, if you guys ever heard of that. I don't think they still run it. But there's lots of community events that are like that, which bring people in, bring them together, get them working on different projects. They're out there. And so those are some of the best ways to make those personal connections. LinkedIn and social media it's a great place to make connections, meet people. It's also a great place to be insulted for no good reason. If anyone's ever spent time on Twitter. So we'll start with LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, is everybody here on LinkedIn? Everyone here? Yeah, hands, show hands, everyone on LinkedIn? Okay, super. If you're not, get on LinkedIn today. I don't know what you're doing. So this is the best platform for getting hired right now and sort of having a digital professional presence. As a recruiter, I basically have to live there. So I'm sending LinkedIn messages all day. I'm communicating on the platform. I'm making connections with people, setting up phone calls, looking at resumes, etc. It's really, really powerful. The one thing that a lot of job seekers fail to do that I think is really important if you're considering going on the market, or even if you're just trying to keep everything fresh, is you want to treat your LinkedIn exactly like you treat a resume. So maybe not exactly, but by and large, right? So you want to have a lot of specificity in what you're doing. So you want to flesh out the roles that you've done. What technologies you use where. So when I'm a recruiter and I'm looking at someone's profile and it's just worked at this company, this company, this company, and there's a gobbledygook of technologies at the bottom, it doesn't tell me a lot, right? So if I'm super curious, I might message, but if I'm really pressed for time and I know my client really wants a specific technology like Angular 4 or Angular 6 or React or whatever, and it's just in the bottom, I don't know if you ever used it professionally. I don't know if you just used it 3 jobs back and you hated it. It's just not enough detail to really know who would be pumped about the opportunity I have, right? So when you add the specificity, it's really for your benefit because it's
Have people that you don't necessarily know directly, or should it be more like, I actually know you, and yes, I do?
If you do that, you'll find a lot of recruiters.
yeah.
Right.
It's kind of a platform for recruiters a little bit, if we're being honest
Right.
about what LinkedIn. I mean, it's all this cool content, but it's really about recruiters stalking you. What I would say is, I would still say that I don't add people on LinkedIn that I haven't spoken with or I'm not immediately interested in speaking with right that second. Having a bigger LinkedIn network, the way that they're set up, it actually is like almost like a force multiplier because you're kind of connected to everyone that they're connected to, right? It's like 3 degrees of separation.
Right.
And so it opens up your messaging platform, but then, how often do you really need, as an IT professional, how often are you trying to message somebody 2 connections out? Like how often are you trying to get a hold of someone
Right.
that, you know what I mean? Like it's like a friend of a friend. It's super rare. My perspective and sort of the way I've kind of gotten into it is to just try to make sure, I connect with the candidate, we have a conversation. Even if I'm not submitting that candidate for any positions, I'm usually going to go ahead and request to connect to them because you never know what's going to happen in the future. It's positive interaction. The guy or the lady was super nice and we were able to have a good information exchange. Even if it goes nowhere, it can be valuable. I think that the metric is like, hey, do I think right now or in the fairly near future, maybe the next 2 years, is there going to be value in this interaction? I think you can use that as a metric beyond just that immediate, like, I was on a project with Martha and she was awesome, right? If someone asks you, hey, can you give a referral, you can always just say, hey, I don't know him that well. It's not gonna put any mud on your face or kind of put you in a bad spot. That's my perspective, though.
Because I get a lot of the recruiter, hey, I want to connect, and I'm like, I don't know you, Adam, so I just ignore it.
Yeah, and actually, you can, if you really get annoyed by that, you can totally punish those recruiters. If you click, I don't know this person, it's like, it doesn't do anything directly. Yeah, get them. You got them. All right, nice. So when you click, I don't know this person enough times, like if I'm just blind adding people all day on LinkedIn, which I guess could be a strategy if you don't want to pay for a LinkedIn recruiter seat, which are very expensive, by the way. So if you don't want to pay for that seat and you're blind adding people all day like that, if enough people click, I don't know you, they put you in recruiter timeout. They're like, you're not off the platform, but you're not our friend anymore for the next 2 months. And so that's something you can do if you're trying to curtail that behavior, but they can just make a new account because it's not, anyway, you get the idea. But just a fun fact about LinkedIn. But
as far as the Facebook, Instagram, I haven't experienced this firsthand, but I have heard of employers that would like to see your Facebook profile.
Oh, yeah.
As part of the condition. So what I do is, I think you've got the first one listed. I was just in the bathroom. I always I actually take my profile completely offline and I'm actively searching for jobs.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the case where that raises a red flag for a employee? Oh, he put his Facebook offline.
No,
I
yeah.
don't even know about it. That's
I wouldn't say so, because they're not going to be like, he deleted his Facebook profile, he's obviously a neo-Nazi, right? That's not like the next logical step. That's not necessarily the first thing that happens. I would say if you take it down and ask about it, it's really easy just to say, like, I don't trust Mark Zuckerberg, and everyone's like, yeah, I get that, okay. Everyone pretty much understands, like, hey, I've just had this idea that I want to have more privacy. If it comes up,
Gotcha.
there's probably going to be some record. I think we all know everything you do on the internet, there's some record somewhere. It's pretty much impossible to really erase the fact that you're on Facebook, but I don't think that's a huge issue. It's actually been happening a little bit with like Customs and Border Patrol when you're coming into the country. If you're like a foreign national, they want to look at your social media, and so that can be red flaggy, but that's like super far outside my sphere of knowledge.
Question.
Yeah.
Question.
Go.
So I've heard that the premium version of LinkedIn gets you more views, gets you more in front of the right people or right recruiters, that kind of stuff. That's how they market it.
Mm-hmm.
What's your experience on that?
So I don't think it makes any difference at all from my seat. So if I'm paying for a LinkedIn recruiter license, I can already search by keywords, I can search by job titles, I can search by location. And so the part that's really critical is the first part I was talking about, which is actually get your profile up to date, like with specificity. And it's okay to have, like really bullet points like you have in your resume in there. That's going to get you the most visibility because you're going to show up in searches. Because like when I'm, it's like, unless I already know you, I'm going to have to search for criteria. Like I'm looking for someone with 7 years of experience in Java with React and I'm just throwing out random things, but you get the idea. Like I'm kind of creating like a wish list, and if all that information is in your profile, you're going to show right up in that feed. And as competitive as it is right now, I'm going to hit everybody up in that entire list every single time if it's even close. If I'm like 20% this person might be a fit, I'm going to send a message just because that edge case person that may be more passive, that might be the person that you end up placing in the role, right? So personally, I wouldn't pay for like LinkedIn Premium that way. Is it really expensive? I don't know anything about it.
They give you pretty much you can do like an introductory price, and it's like, I think it's like less than $9 for the first month. And so if you're not on a long job hunt, it's worth it just to do the one shot, because then you can see your view, your profile, and that kind of stuff, so it'll give you insight on if the employer's interested or not. You'll see hits from them, except they could also be premium members and market themselves private, so you won't know that. But that's a whole other category.
It's like layers of skullduggery, right?
Yeah. So it will give you some insight into who actually is coming in, finding your profile in a search, and you can use that to where maybe they looked it over because you weren't an exact fit. Reach out to them and say, hey, what did you have?
They actually have 1 month free. And
1 month free. That's right.
$30 a month.
Yeah, so it does. It's not worth maintaining. It's worth doing the 1 month free and then canceling. But it's like most of those things. If you forget to cancel, you will get charged.
Yeah, you get and I'm sorry to have more insight on that. It's stuff because I'm on the recruiting side. The LinkedIn Recruiter is a totally separate product that is awesome. If LinkedIn questions, please leave me my seat. No, the other thing I failed to really hit hard in that other piece was there's a flag setting for like searching for new opportunities in your LinkedIn profile. So if you didn't know this, you can go on your LinkedIn profile and throw your flag up like I'm looking. It's like catnip to recruiters. When I see that, it's definitely like, it goes down to like that 2% chance. I'm like, well, he's looking. If this isn't the right fit, maybe I'm going to have something else here in the short term or midterm. I can circle back on. Go ahead.
So what about the recruiters at the company you're currently at?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know, how afraid are you of getting fired for looking for a job? That's a question you have to ask.
Can you control who sees the flag?
I don't know. I'm not super, I'm sorry, this is like out of my head.
Actually, you can.
It says that, they will do
won't
an
let you.
effort not to let your current employers to see that you are looking for a job. But then there's a disclaimer that we cannot 100% be sure about it.
Yeah, I think to your point, there's some measure of risk, right? And I think anytime you're actively job searching, you're taking on a little bit of risk that you're going to get caught.
Is there any true risk? I mean, wouldn't it actually, unless you're really a bad employee, wouldn't it be like almost like, hey, I'm shopping around, you better treat me right?
It depends. So like employers tend to have, employers have a lot of different personalities, I'll say.
Yeah.
So you're going to be, in the seat you're in, you're going to be the most armed to know or to anticipate how an employer is going to react. It may hurt you in a performance review, like you're gunning for a lead role, right? You've been a senior dev for 4 years, crushing the game, doing code reviews, and you're ready for that that bump up in pay and improvement, but you throw your flag up because you're frustrated, it might hurt you in that
I know
review.
the disclaimer I always use for that, right, if I do get called out, is I need to keep my interview skills fresh.
Sure.
And I'm not necessarily looking for a job, I'm just looking for interview experience to keep my interview skills straight.
It's a great line.
Yeah.
Well, and you can also just say, hey, I'm never closed off to hearing about something new. So you can always just say that, like, hey, I'm always going to be open to hearing about new opportunities, and that's all the flag is supposed to say anyway. It's not like I need a job today, right? Like that's not. They did that way on purpose.
When you stop looking, make me a franchise.
That's right.
Then we're good to go.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, the next step down. So, targeted resumes. So, if you identify a role, you don't have a personal connection, your resume is probably your best tool for getting in. It's a really blunt instrument. It's hard to be really surgical with a resume the way that you want to be because you just can't. It goes back to that problem of like information asymmetry. You don't know exactly what's going to get them super pumped up to talk to you, right? Like you can infer things and you can make guesses, but you're just not going to know. Targeted resumes, I think they're underutilized, and I think people could benefit from doing more targeted resumes. And so basically, take the time to customize to match the role. So it is worth it. It really doesn't take that much time to dial in your resume. We're talking about putting in 2 or 3 bullet points, maybe tweaking a title to be a little bit different, maybe reorganizing the bullet points you already have. It can be just that simple, and that can make a big difference. As you customize the copies of your resume, if you're looking to break into, if you're a manual QA and you're looking to break into an SDET role, you might say, Melinda SDET, right? Like, you want to like tag them in some way that you keep track of what you're kind of customizing your resumes to, just from an organization standpoint, because as you, if it's a broad search or repeated search, that can be helpful from an organization standpoint. The thing that people kind of forget sometimes is you want to order your bullet points in terms of what you want the person to see. So if you think of like emails, and there's a study about this, the longer the email goes, like the more paragraphs in the email, the lower the number of eyeballs make it to the bottom. Like people just lose interest, right? Because we're scrolling on Instagram. It's not all social media's fault, right? But we have limited attention spans, and so whatever you think the most critical information is should be at the top bullet points. I think people kind of don't think about that. They assume everyone's going to read every word, and I can tell you as a recruiter, I just don't have the time or the mental capacity to read every word of every resume I'm reading, and so that can be pretty critical. You also want to highlight your accomplishments. So I've seen a lot of resumes where people put in like we or the team did this and that. It's like I don't really care what we did. I care what you did. And your future employer is going to care what you did, what you wrote. And by all means, talk about your contributions. But when you're talking about what a team delivered and you were like in the meeting, off to the side, not doing anything, it's not really very impactful. The other piece is if you can, we used to put a resume in for something. Email, LinkedIn message, carrier pigeon. You want to put that personal touch on it because you actually give a crap. No one really reads cover letters that I'm aware of. Like, a lot of employers won't even look at your resume without a cover letter, so you almost have to have one, but it's not really nearly as impactful as any kind of a personal contact message. I know this seems really base level, but it's a good refresher to remember the human element. Like, humans are going to be hiring you, right? Like, it's not a machine that's going to be hiring you. So finding some way to touch that potential employer is going to make a big difference, right? It can be something super creative, it can be something super simple, but the more excited you are about it, the more energy you want to put into thinking about how to stand out that way. All right, here we go. Recruiters and job boards. So, go ahead. Wait, no. Okay. As you connect with other IT professionals, my recommendation is to ask for referrals to recruiters you had good experiences with. There are a ton of recruiters in every major metropolitan city in America. There are a ton. They're everywhere. So asking for referrals to recruiters that people have good experiences with is generally going to yield a good experience to you. A lot of times, if they aren't working in the space that you're in, they're going to know someone who is, and it'll prevent you from having to separate out as much signal from noise, right? So this is a good fun fact. 200 IT staffing and consulting firms in Charlotte alone. So there's 200 firms with offices here, with people like me at desks and computers like mine with phones like mine trying to find candidates. And so what that means on a practical level is you have an enormous amount of choice in who you work with. You do not have to work with a recruiter that calls you the first time or that calls you 15 times or that annoys you to death. In fact, I recommend not rewarding that behavior. Anybody here ever gotten like repeat calls from recruiters? Anyone? No? Yes? I'm really sorry, it wasn't me. It definitely makes things tough. So that choice piece is critical. So posting your resume to job boards can be helpful. So like job boards were really big when I started. So like Career Builder, Monster, and Dice. Now Indeed's really big. They've really kind of become less and less critical to my recruiting efforts as time has gone on. I still go on them. I still look. People are increasingly not needing to post their resume up to that kind of content or contact because of LinkedIn and because of just personal connections, right? When you are starting a job search as a Java developer in Charlotte, you need to set up a Google Voice number. I believe it is still free. And you also need to set up a job search email account, which Gmail or whatever you like, I don't care. You will thank me later. So if you put out your personal phone number on your resume anywhere public, you are going to get blown up until the end of time. People will call you 10 years later. I see the head hung and just brutal. Like you probably still get calls today for your resume that was up 10 years ago. You get those databases and people will blow you up forever and ever on them. It's super important to be able to control that contact because I know when I get blown up that way for any kind of contact, it stresses me out, unfocuses me from what I'm doing, and I can't imagine a more focused endeavor than software engineering where you really need to be dialed in. If you get pulled all the way out, it might take you 15 minutes to get back to the problem or longer. So this is pretty critical. So Dice is probably one of the best boards for developers along with Indeed. Monster and Career Builder can be usable, especially when you're like looking and you don't have maybe as much experience, but you can probably stop at Dice and Indeed and get more than enough contact from everything you'd ever want. Be prepared to sort through mountains of garbage. Getting called about help desk jobs in Idaho. Getting called about, oh, you do Java? I have this great JavaScript job, right? Everyone's got that call here, right? We can talk about it. Just people that don't know what they're doing, people that are going too fast, people that are trying to hit metrics. This is sort of the reality of the industry. So if you're doing this, just kind of go into it with those eyes open and realize that you're going to sort through a ton of crap. Let's say we got the offer. We're super excited about the offer. We're super excited about getting to the offer stage with a potential employer. Before you get into that salary stage, you should definitely do your homework. There are a lot of free resources to show you what market salaries look like in your area. So there's Glassdoor is the big one that I've kind of used personally, just trying to get a feel for like, okay, what other employers of the same size offer for this level of position. It can be hard to sort through the job titles, but you can get a general idea. There's also, I think it's a platform called Hush. Maybe I heard of Hush? I don't know. There's some new ones.
Maybe the name prevented the...
Yeah, right. There's some newer platforms out there where you have like anonymous salary sharing information. I'm not as familiar with them, so because they're really for software engineers, and I'm not a software engineer. But it's worth doing your homework before you get into the offer stage, just to know what you're worth. You definitely need to consider the size of the company. So as a general rule of thumb, a startup is going to pay less than a mid-sized company is going to pay less than a Fortune 100. Not always true, and there can be situations where that doesn't hold true, especially if you get really, really specialized. But you should sort of temper your expectations based on the size of the company and the sort of culture you're driving in, right? Like if you want to work at the company with a ping pong table and the owner is there every day, and then it's working 90 hours a week, but it's something you're really excited about, you may end up taking less salary than working on something that's not as exciting to you, like a timekeeping application, or you get the idea. And then when it comes time to talk about money, this is like age-old advice. Don't be the first to say a number. A lot of employers want you to come out with what you want, and then that lets them just sort of give you what you want, but they may have much more in the budget, and the information asymmetry, losing that information asymmetry battle is where you lose out, where you may leave some money on the table. Be prepared to let it linger. Like when they want you to don't say a number, just let it go. She's like, I'm just not under any circumstances. Just go into it with that mentality. It'll help a lot. Assume they're going to lowball out of the gate. There's room for negotiation. Very rarely is the offer that comes out of the gate the absolute best offer you can possibly get. I'm not saying you can't be a jerk and really negotiate yourself out of a job. If you really act like a super jerk about it, I'm sure you could rub someone the wrong way. But I haven't come across situations or heard of situations where asking for more PTO or 10K more or 1 day a week remote or any other perk like that is going to cost you an offer, right? If they want you and you're asking for a little bit more and you're really excited about it, if they don't give it to you, they may be able to offer something in compromise, right? And so there's lots of areas where a small ask is going to be rewarded pretty well. I'm trying to be cognizant of time here too, so sorry, I'm trying to be quick. Increasingly, states and cities, and this is different areas across the country. I'm being trained now as an IT recruiter to not ask about previous salary because in certain states and cities, it is now straight up illegal to ask about your current salary or current compensation. And actually, in some jurisdictions, it's like a $250,000 fine if they got caught doing it, right? So I'm pretty good at my job, but they would definitely fire me if we got fined $250,000. 100%, I'm hitting the street looking for a job, right? So you can kind of use this information as you will, but a lot of employers want to know what your current compensation is like. You don't have to share it. If they try to force the issue, you're empowered to make your own decisions, but it's better to not share it if you can avoid it, because it gives them that when they have that first number, it sort of takes away that information asymmetry piece that we were talking about earlier, right? All right. Forging ahead. There we go. All right. Resume strategies. I'm going to try to move fairly quickly through this, just because this is I want to be again really aware of everyone's time and give everybody time to mingle and enjoy the wonderful open bar. Entry-level resumes. Keep it to 1 page. 5 pages when you haven't done anything professionally is kind of crazy. I've seen lots of weird stuff as a recruiter, so not shocking. Focus on your personal projects and educational work. We don't have a lot of work history. The more interesting, the better to you, and really go into a lot of detail about what you delivered on. No one cares about your hobbies. It's awesome that you do underwater basket weaving and karate on the weekends, and you do horseback riding, and you braid your friend's hair for money, whatever. Don't put it on your resume. No one cares. Talk about it in the interview, because it humanizes you, but don't put it on your resume. There's been a lot more headshots on resumes. It just seems like pure chaos. I know, right? Headshots on resumes. Don't do it. If you're thinking about it, don't do it. It's not a good idea. They can track you down on LinkedIn and find out what you look like. Read your whole resume out loud. It seems like really straightforward advice, and it's like, oh, that's super obvious. You would be amazingly shocked at the number of people that have terrible grammatical errors, that when you're talking with them on the phone, they don't talk like this. They don't have an English deficiency, and they're not having issues with getting style and grammar correct, but they just never bothered to read it after they typed it the very first time. So sit down, make yourself read the whole thing out loud. This is actually true for all levels of resumes. And this is a good writing and speaking kind of strategy. Link your GitHub and Stack Overflow account with, if you're contributing Stack Overflow and helping people, that's awesome. Again, with those caveats we talked about earlier. And find ways to show personal commitment to development. So like, I'm kind of like a broken record about this, but like hackathons, meetups, talks you've given, ways you've gotten involved in the community. There's definitely a subset of employers that are looking for that beyond just what you've coded. They want to see that you're like pumped about this, that when you go home, you think about code, this is something that you fire up and out of bed in the morning. Mid and senior level resume strategy. So basically, it's totally fine to pull off of one page. A lot of people still have this idea that you need to keep your professional resume of 20 years onto one page, which is insanity. I don't know where this idea got out, but it's totally fine to spill onto multiple pages. My personal rule of thumb is about 5 pages. The further you go out to like 10-page territory, it starts getting pretty nutty. So like a lot of employers will just throw resumes out that are too long and not even look. Go ahead.
I was just gonna throw in something too, as a recruiter as well. Like I noticed like a lot of people like recently at least some of the resumes I've been seeing, they'll put like a half a page at the beginning that'll just say professional summary, and they'll like kind of summarize the whole thing. A lot of our hiring managers at least at like bank and wells, like usually they want to skip right over that part. And I mean even if you do include it in there, maybe like 2 or 3 sentences is fine, like not necessarily like half a page,
Oh yeah, a lot of the resumes that I'll see, they'll kind of like do a total technical inventory of everything they've ever done, and I've even seen them go all the way onto the second page of a summary, which defeats the purpose of a summary as far as I'm concerned. So definitely avoid that. I think it's okay to have, I wouldn't even say a mission statement, but even like a baseline summary of like, here's who I am and here's what I want to do. That's totally fine. As long as it's short, concise, and to the point and speaks to what you want to do, yeah, it's good. Take the time to think critically about your next career move as you write out bullet points. Not everyone's super strategic. A lot of people are tactical, like, oh my God, the company went under, I've got to search tomorrow. And so it can like limit your ability to think strategically and just kind of throwing things on the page. As much as possible, as much as humanly possible, think about what you want to do next and think about what someone would want to see in that job you want to do next. So there's like a little bit of a theory of the mind thing going on here, right? Like you have to infer what a future employer might want to see. It can be super challenging to condense let's say a 6-year roll down into 15 bullets, because my God, I mean, you might have been on 10 different projects, you might have worked with 40 different technologies, there's all kinds of stuff to be on there. Focus in on what you think is going to be appealing to that next employer, where you want to go next. Avoid like really long, flowy narrative descriptions of projects, because that's the information you want to give verbally. So like, there's that humanization aspect and storytelling aspect to your background and what you've done. What you want to do is keep your bullet points dead factual. Like, hey, here's what I delivered, here's what it did, here's how it worked. And then you maybe just a very, very quick blurb about the narrative about what the project was. Like, oh, this is an HR application. Oh, this was a security application, whatever. And then when the employer asks you, the potential employer is asking you about it, that's the time to go nuts. Like, talk about, okay, here's the situation. We had this much budget, we had this much time. We guessed it's going to take 6 months. It actually is going to take 12 months. Standard software engineering stuff. So be as specific as you can about the frameworks and technologies. So, and then finally, be liberal with your titles. It doesn't mean go nuts, like don't be the president of America if you've never been elected president, right? But if you were a senior software engineer and you were essentially acting as a lead, meaning you're like doing code reviews, you're kind of like setting coding standards, you're basically like taking ownership maybe of design depending on the type of environment you're in, it is okay to call yourself a lead because that is what you were doing.
I got a question. Is there a limit to that? Because I actually talked down my titles with a smaller organization where I was VP of software engineering.
Yes.
But I'm applying for dev positions, and they're going to see that as like VP, why is he applying for
Correct.
dev position? So I walked that down to like,
Senior software engineer.
Senior software engineer.
Yeah, or lead software engineer.
So there is a limit to that where you don't necessarily want to put your highest title necessarily.
Right.
If you're not searching for a similar like Eliassen type title.
Yeah, it goes back to that whole thinking critically about what you want to do next. If you want to be a VP of software development in a larger company or a mid-sized company, that might be the best title. If you're applying for a senior dev role at a bank or Wells, that may not be advantageous. So if you're like, a lot of times you see like people are director of a company with 8 people at it, you know what I mean? And there's like 2 developers, not director. It's like, well, you're a director, but you're a senior dev, and also you're the garbage guy, and we all wear a lot of hats here, right? So you want to think about what you want to do next as you make those decisions for sure. It's something to consider carefully. Titles matter though. People look at titles and they get like super locked in, especially hiring managers. So as a recruiters, shout out recruiters over here. As recruiters, we know titles don't really mean too much. We're really focused on the meat and potatoes of what was happening. Hiring managers don't always share that perspective because they might be hiring twice a year. You get the idea, versus staring at resumes 40 hours a week. Go.
One thing on the sharing the technologies in your frameworks, as a hiring manager, list things you actually did. I've had people put things on that, like get technical inventory that looks good on buzzwords and keyword searches that they never actually use. So you get to call them out on lives in an interview, and that's no fun.
No.
So, be realistic.
The end around there is a lot of folks will put like an environment. They'll like throw at the bottom of all the bullet points. They'll throw in the technical environment. So you can give kind of, you can like set the stage. Like, hey, it was an AWS environment. We're using, these testing tools. But your bullet points speak to what you actually did. You kind of have it out there. But yeah, putting it into like your skills section, not recommended, because there's managers that are super sticklers about that. Where there you go. Yeah, and she will get you. She'll get you.
I did several times.
Technical leadership and management resume strategies. As you transition to dev management, which is obviously we all know dev retirement, you're going to want to focus less on specific technologies and more on like delivery and hard facts. So the resume formatting and the way it's presented goes away from the technical and more into delivery. So track record of delivering on time or ahead of time and under budget is a lot of times what employers are looking for, because that's what they want their dev teams to do, right? They don't want them to go to balloon over budget and then blow up their deadlines, et cetera, et cetera. You want to focus on mentorship, people management, budgetary management, so it sort of ties in right there. And now we are at the Q&A, I think 1 hour, boom.
You're not much of the work.
Yeah, right? Thank you. Questions? Go.
Yeah, so if you've been at a company, let's say for like a long time, as opposed to like jumping around from company to company, would you say it's acceptable to expand your resume for that time? Like to take up as much space as you would with like 5 different companies if you worked for 5 different companies?
That's an option. So a lot of times the way people will do that is they'll kind of like break it into, like you have a position subheading. So like let's say you're with the widget factory, whatever, we'll just say. You're with the widget factory for a solid decade, and you don't want a one-page resume because you're a 10-year software engineer, and oh my God, how do I condense 10 years down into one page or one role? What a lot of times you start out as a junior dev, you're promoted to mid-level developer, promoted to senior level developer, now you're a lead because you've been there a decade. What you can do to work around that as a strategy is you have subheadings. You have the overall title, like, hey, this is the widget company, right, and this is the years. You have your current title at the top, and then you have your bullet points, and then you have one-line space, and boom, your title before that. You don't have any new subheadings, you don't have any new dates. So it takes a second, usually the manager will pick right up, okay, he's been with the same company, but he's done all these different things and moved up. So that's one strategy to show that progression. You can also blow it out, but the longer you're there, the more blown out it gets. It's like, if you think about reading paragraphs, like if you can think about the bullet points like paragraphs on a page, if you've ever tried to sit down and read a block of text without any breaks, it is brutal, and you lose focus, and you just like, forget this, and just throw it away. That can totally happen if you don't break up that monotony in a long, long list of bullet points. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does. Super.
Go, we'll get to it.
So how does it work when you're non-developer and you're transitioning to developer? So like you have an accounting or tax background, or accounting and finance background, how do you shape that for like entry-level developer, resume, and what's finance and accounting and how it's working in software?
Great question. So there's a couple different strategies you can take. Depending on what you've done to break into development, you can structure your resume in such a way you can be like non-technical roles with all your time, like not relevant experience, you can hide it away. So if you've been doing dev stuff for a year or two, you can kind of crunch it down and just say, hey, from 1998 to 2015, I was doing outside of the IT industry, experience available upon request. So you're like, I'm not hiding anything, but we don't have to talk about it on my resume. And then boom, you're going to blow out and do all the specificity on your development tasks. If you are currently a finance professional and you're trying to break into software engineering, I think the easiest strategy would be to sort of, I'm trying to think of the easiest way. You could list out those, what I would do is list those titles and years and just crunch them up next to each other, just boom, 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 like stacked. So like no spacing between them, just to crunch it at the bottom and then blow out the top with as much as you can. Like focus on hackathons, meetups, community involvement, GitHub repos, whatever, Stack Overflow, links, etc. Just to give as much as you can. It can be super tough. The hardest job to get in software engineering is your first one. It is super, super tough. And the best way to do it is by meeting people at Meetups. So there you go. Or similar kind of making those personal connections, because it's when I have a junior dev role, I have no shortage of candidates. Right? That's the thing that's like really hard about recruiting is so like you have a junior dev role, you have 9,000 applicants from all over the place, and they're willing to do it for a penny because they want to get started in IT staffing, right? Or not IT staffing, IT, software engineering. And so, but then, you get to mid-level and it's like no one is interested. And to see level, it becomes extremely difficult to find folks. So because of that asymmetry in candidate availability, you got to do everything you can to stand out. And it's that human aspect that usually gets people over the hump. Cool. Go.
So I'm in several subreddit communities, CS career questions, experience devs, some of those kind of things, and a lot of them have been talking about lead code finding, where you've got to do these algorithm searches and all that kind of stuff. Do you find that hiring managers and companies really care about that?
Okay, lead code. I don't know 100%. Can you tell me a
Do you
little
guys know
bit?
what I'm talking about? Yeah.
Like hacker rank.
Oh, hacker.
Yeah.
So we've seen like some kind of like HackerRank type coding challenges where you basically they just have automated tests in the background and they're like, hey, use language of choice, just get to pass these tests. So we've seen tests like that in interview processes. And I work with a ton of hiring managers. So there may be some out there that are super into it. It may be more of a West Coast thing. It could be like situational. So if you just enjoy working on algorithmic development or kind of getting into those sorts of things, go for it. I don't think it's going to hurt you, but I'm not necessarily sure it's like the way to get over the hump or like the way to really stand out.
What about like certifications, like AWS, stuff like that?
They can be really helpful. So the way that we see certifications on the IT staffing side, so the way I experience certifications as a recruiter from where I sit now, is a lot of times the only time I super duper care about a certification is if a manager is requiring it for a position. So you get a lot of managers that will actually have a hard requirement, like we will not hire anybody without an AWS solutions engineer certification, right? So then it becomes absolutely showstopper critical. But if you've been doing AWS engineering, if you're a cloud engineer for the last 5 years and you don't have a cert, I don't really give a crap. I'm still going to submit your resume if you're interested, right? Because the cert doesn't really mean, like I care more about what you're doing professionally than the fact that you can pass the test. There may be edge cases though too. So if you think of, there's certain like development like frameworks or products where they won't even let you roll the product out without a certified developer on staff. Or they like won't let you go to production without someone who's got a certification. So then it becomes hypercritical to those hiring managers. So sorry, that's like kind of a non-answer. But sometimes, I guess.
That could help somebody like who is talking about it doesn't have that experience.
Oh, it can. I mean, it's not a bad thing. I think somebody at the entry level it can help stand out for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna add something on that too. I actually just recently got a really good friend of mine a job at Wells Fargo, and he didn't even he didn't finish his college degree. So it doesn't matter necessarily I guess about the certification degree as long as you know what you're doing,
It's not back to the first job, it's what you did.
Yeah, it all circles back to that.
And I'd like to add something maybe on the benefits side of the fence. So especially once you get past mid-level, when you're on the mid and senior level, one of the benefits that the company can offer, especially if you're a true programming diehard and that's what you love, is ask them about their promotion path. If they've got distinguished engineer like IBM or something along those lines, so that you're not forced to stop doing what you love to manage in order to climb that path, especially if you're looking for full-time.
Yeah, there's a lot of organizations where lead roles are really hands-off. And if you love coding, I imagine you guys aren't in Java user group because you hate coding, right? If you love coding and you don't want to stop, but you want to be a lead capacity, it's really important to investigate what a lead role at the organization looks like. I think that's actually a really a valid point. I think you had something over here. I ignored you, and now we're back.
Yeah. No, I've seen recently resumes, like you said, 2 to 5 pages of resume, but I've seen only 1 page where left-hand side they write the name and some skills and only the bullet points on the right. So that's just a single page. So, and it's kind of 2 different colors. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I've seen them and I hate them.
Okay.
Yeah, they're out there for sure. And again, this is through the lens of what I do. And so a lot of our clients we work with through like a vendor manager or like a VMS system where they have some special requirements. We can't have that kind of formatting go through. Like if I send a resume like that, it'll just get rejected. So I have to go through and pull all that out and then reformat it. That's why I hate it. It's because it's hugely, it costs a lot of effort on my side. It looks great when you're sending it directly to a hiring manager. So I think it can be useful, but it's again, it's a different strategy. There's different opinions about it. The thing about resumes is there's no hard and fast rules, right? There's always edge cases. There's always situational, and there's always that you can't know everything about what they want to see. And so it's about kind of taking your best guess. Sorry. That's it.
I was going to join one last thing. So my buddy James here, I actually recently got into a job at Wells Fargo.
Nice.
Off a Facebook group. So
We just connected through Boone, App State University area.
There you go.
I'll work up there.
Yeah, so basically, he was just mentioning, the best thing to essentially do is, if you have these local community groups, then essentially just join the community group, and sometimes you'll see recruiters posting there about
Yeah, he was just randomly posting, hey, I've had some good opportunities out there. And the timing happened to be right. I was like, I thought about moving to Charlotte.
There you
I
go.
reached out to somebody, I got a personal connection on the recruiting side. I know that's going to help in some aspects. So,
Personal connection.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the
That
personal
goes back to that.
connection worked out well there.
And I
And
think
that's one place where Facebook did help, I guess.
of course. There you go.
But it has to be very targeted now.
Yeah. I think where are we at? You want to cut it?
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna stick around, I mean.
Yeah, I'm gonna hang out. So anybody that wants to chat afterwards, I'll be here till probably 8:30. So come grab me one-on-one, and if you want to chat. And listen, thank you guys so much for hanging out and chatting with me today.
Yeah, thanks, Dave.